I can't tell. Is it 6:15? Okay. Thank you very much. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for coming. We're going to talk a little bit about Wales today. This is the background. Most of you saw this before, but I did neglect to do something else on Monday or Monday it was, when I lectured, and that was to introduce my wife, Lynn, who is down here, because she's the technical manager, and I'm the old generation. I'm a dinosaur. I use a phone, and I have that, but I'm not very good. And she does the things to make sure that the overheads, look good and they're okay. And I depend on her totally for that. So, very important that you have a great manager, to say the least. Anyway, last time we discussed the Celts and Cornwall. And today we're going to talk about Wales, or Cymru. If those of you visiting Wales picked up enough Welsh, that's the name that the Welsh use for their country and their people, Cymru. C-M-Y-R-U. Anyway, for those of you who had been in Fishguard today, I thought we'd just do a quick chat on Fishguard. One slide. It's a fishing village, a traditional fishing village, but now, as you can tell, it's very much based on tourism. So much of these towns have changed that nature. How many of you had a chance to walk around the town today? Most of you are on excursions. Oh, you're pretty decent. Okay. As you may have learned, the town consists of two parts, a lower Fishguard and what's referred to as the main town. And the town name comes from Old Norse, meaning fish-catching enclosure. And that's because of its position on the mouth of the River Gwan. Not surprisingly, though, it's a very picturesque town and the rest. We will talk more about Norse influence in terminology and the rest when we get to the east coast of England, where the Danelaw was, where the Danish ruled the whole good portion of England at the time for many, 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 many years. Anyway, let's get into the substance. 'Cause getting to the substance, this is a decent little map picture of Wales. It's a separate country in the island of Great Britain, if you wish. It's part of the UK, but it hasn't always been. And there are a lot of differences that we're going to discuss in this presentation. It'll be interesting to see if we think it's something that could be independent, if you wish. Anyway, I want to make sure we all know the terminology, because most of us, especially us Yanks, are pretty muddy on this. And the great terminology is the following. Great Britain is the island. It consists of Scotland, England itself, and Wales. That's Great Britain. Now, the United Kingdom, which is the term we use, the political term, includes all of those and Northern Ireland, which is the Protestant area, basically, and is considered part of the United Kingdom. Ireland itself, as the North and South Ireland, are separate, and if we talk about the British Isles, which is what this cruise is all about, it's everything. It's the Irelands, the Great Britain, etc. So you've got all three countries, England, Scotland, and Wales, Northern Ireland, and then regular Ireland. And so as a result, they all have independent flags, actually, as you can see. And what we're going to focus on today is the last flag, the Wales flag with the dragon in it. And this dragon has been associated with Wales for centuries. And with any ancient symbol, it's sort of hard to understand how it's changed over the course of time. But more importantly, what is its origin? Why do the Welsh have this on their map? And we've got several possible explanations. The dragon emblem was on the pennants of the Roman cavalry during the occupation of UK. When the Rome occupied, it was able to occupy part of UK. And so that was on their pendants. It was also used by the Welsh kings in the early 5th century when Rome left England and Great Britain. And, that would be a reason for it to continue. It obviously symbolizes authority. And the dragon symbol was used also when there was revolts against the English kings. So it was a pretty strong symbol. And, whatever it was, we now have that flag. Now, the Welsh government had lobbied the UK government, the British or English government, for years to get its own flag. And the English government said, no way. You were not a kingdom, so you don't deserve a flag. They finally succeeded in 1959. And this was the flag they instituted. And in 1960 was the first time it flew. So that, when you see that, and you'll see that a lot, you might have seen it a lot today in Wales, it's around as a symbol. And in addition, it's more importantly, it's on their flag. Now, here we go. Here's Welsh identity. And Welsh identity existed after the Romans left. We'll get back to talk about the Romans in a second. But this gives you a good idea. If it stopped moving, it gets me. Anyway, Wales is one of the modern Celtic nations, along with Ireland, Scotland, Brittany, and Cornwall, as I discussed last time. And you'll see this symbol, and that is the modern. That's the Welsh word for Wales. The word is actually descended from an earlier word meaning fellow countryman or compatriot. And it emphasizes that the Welsh in modern Wales and their early ancestors were one people, different from all the others. In particular, this term is not applied to the Cornish or to the Breton people, who are of a similar heritage and similar culture and similar language to the Welsh, to say the least. So while Wales is part of Great Britain, it does see itself as separate in many ways, and we're going to talk about those in the course of this discussion. Now, while Wales has its own government and parliament today, it didn't in the past. And from the early 1700s to the late 1990s, Wales was ruled by law from the government of the United Kingdom. We'll abbreviate that as UK to make it easier. Both the UK government and parliament are based, of course, in Westminster in London, England. Today, Wales does have its own legislature. The Welsh Parliament is responsible for making, scrutinizing, and passing laws. And it does have sort of an executive branch that is designed to help make the day-to-day activities of people or decisions that affect the Welsh people. They form an executive function, just similar to the way we have an executive function and the way all major states have executive functions. Here's some of the road signs, which you possibly have seen today if you took excursions. Wales has a distinct national and cultural identity. And from the late 19th century, it's acquired its own concepts of what people think about with Wales. And one of that is that it's a land of song. Because of rousing choirs and songs, and the Welsh are well known for that. Now, the Welsh language, as I talked about the last time, is derived totally from Celtic words. And here's a great sign. I mean, our video person in the back, Craig in the back, could probably pronounce all of this because he comes from Cardiff. Obviously, most of us, the rest, unless you do too, I'd have an awful difficult time trying to translate that. But here's the English, makes it easy, and this is the Welsh that means the same thing, to say the least. Now, while the population in most areas of Wales speak English, because that is the language of the United Kingdom, the population in parts of North and West Wales also speak Welsh. And in fact, out of the population of 3 million in Wales, 538,300 people speak Welsh. And actually, Welsh and English are the two official languages of Wales. So, you probably heard a lot of Welsh being spoken during the day. And it's I find it extremely impossible to translate it, even if I knew any of it. Now, going back in time, let's start right from the beginning. Roman rule. These lines on the map show the Roman military incursions into Wales. The Roman rule lasted over 300 years, and it was a military occupation because the Welsh always resisted the Romans. The Romans were able to extract gold, copper, and lead. And Latin was the official language during the Roman occupation, but the Welsh language still continued underneath all of that. And as a result, it never died. And in fact, when they passed sort of individual laws, they didn't use Latin. They used the Welsh language, so very important. And the Romans controlled Wales, like they controlled most of England south of Scotland, until about 383. And at that time, the Roman general was Magnus Maximus. And he took almost all his Roman troops back to Rome because he was making a bid to be emperor. But it was also around that time that we started to get barbarian invasions into Rome. And so as a result, power was transferred. When he took the Roman troops away, power was transferred to the local authorities in all of the parts of Wales. It's surprisingly enough, the Welsh consider this general maybe the father of Wales because of that. He enabled them to be their own rulers. Roman rule ended totally in 410. There was no more Roman rule in either Wales or England as a result. Now, as discussed a little bit in my presentation on Cornwall and the Celts, after the Romans left, there was a tremendous void, if you wish. And somebody else saw an advantage and an opportunity to invade. And that was the Anglo-Saxons, the Germanic tribes that we talked about last time from the heart of Central Europe. And they saw a way to create separate kingdoms in Britain. The Welsh tenaciously opposed that and were fighting that all the time. So the Anglo-Saxons had a very difficult time imposing their sort of domination. And that's one reason why the Anglo-Saxon language, the Germanic language, which is the basis of English, was not really put in place there, to say the least. Okay, after the Anglo-Saxons, because they didn't exist forever, and they integrated totally in a way, the Vikings moved in, and we're going to talk in in great depth about the Vikings later on in another lecture. And as I said the last time, Viking language, the Scandinavian languages are such a part of English that you don't even know it. And it was always a surprise to me when I found what words came from the Scandinavian languages, what expressions, what personal pronouns came from the Scandinavian languages. What the Welsh did when the Vikings came, they actually made peace with the Vikings to remain independent, and they paid a large ransom not to be absorbed into the Viking governance of Danelaw, which is on the east, of course, of England. And we're going to discuss all that in great depth in a later lecture, say the least. So the Normans were the final successful invasion, and that's 1066. And the Normans, of course, came from the province of Normandy in France. But why do they have the name Normans? Because they were descendants of Vikings also. The Norse invaders in France were given the land, given the province of Normandy to keep them there instead of raiding elsewhere. And that's a major story in and of itself. When the Normans invaded in 1066, they didn't stop at the border of Wales. They invaded and tried to conquer Wales. Wales took, though, 100 years for them to be successful, whereas it took them no time to be really successful in the main provinces of England. William the Conqueror, whose original name was William the Bastard, became nice change. He became William the Conqueror. He became the ruler of England right away after that. Anyway, the castles were introduced. A lot of castles were introduced into England by the Normans. And that way they controlled their new territories, and they were a symbol of their authority, to say the least. Welsh princes in the 13th century also started to build castles. They were much inferior to the Norman ones. They weren't as strong, but they were designed to be similar. This is a map of Wales, and it shows you all the castles. The black indicates stone castles. Most of them are Norman, and the reddish colors are earthwork castles. And there's, amazing numbers, to say the least. But that was the way you controlled your population in some ways in those days. I think we have other ways nowadays, obviously. Carnarvon is probably the most famous of the castles in Wales. And that's where, the Prince of Wales is, crowned, if you wish, or anointed. And it was designed by Normans to make a really strong symbolic statement about the occupation. It was decorated with carved eagles and branded masonry, sort of resembling the walls of Constantinople. If you've been to Istanbul today, you'll see the walls of Istanbul, the Theodosian walls. Theodosian was a Roman emperor, and it's very effective walls and very effective castle, to say the least. Okay, at the end of the 1200s, so after the Normans are now running France, running England, but eventually, their line sort of dies out as rulers. At the end of the 1200s, all of Wales got united under the English crown. It was still a separate country, but it had the same king, same English king. Edward the First's son became the first English Prince of Wales, and that was in 1301. The title was granted to him as the heir apparent. He was going to succeed his father in England. And it was a personal honor. It was not inheritable, The title would only go to the eldest son of the English king, but it became a standing tradition, and it still is the same tradition today. So that as a result, as we are going to talk about here, Prince Charles was Prince of Wales, and now William is Prince of Wales. Here's the Tudor dynasty from the results of a war that we had finally in the 15th century, which is the War of the Roses. The royal families of the Yorks versus the Lancasters, fighting for who's going to be king. Henry Tudor was the nephew of the Lancasters, and he launched his battle for the throne in 1485. He defeated the then existing ruler, Richard III, of England, and he became King Henry VII of England. And here's his dynasty, all the way down to Edward VI. And you can tell there is a much more famous king under him. Those of you who are English would know. But Henry VIII is right there. He's the next king after Henry VII died. It's a family tree. And Henry VIII took it upon himself to enact a whole series of laws that impacted Wales. And this was in 1535. He had 42, he had a series of laws integrating Wales with England. He abolished the Welsh legal system. He banned the Welsh language from any official role. He did allow Welsh representatives to come and be in the British Parliament, and we still have that, of course, today. But it was a real incorporation, and Wales as an independent entity really disappeared at that time. Wales commercially benefited from that very strongly because the Union allowed it to manufacture and be a supplier to the rest of England and then eventually Scotland. And in fact, the one town, Swansea in Wales, became the world's major center for metal smelting. And that was in the 19th century, early 19th century. They could also do work on copper from Cornwall, which we talked about the last time, and eventually they did iron smelting. And by 1820, South Wales accounted for 40% of all of the iron manufactured in Britain. Coal mining became synonymous with Wales, if you wish, because Wales became the major exporter of coal, just like Cornwall, as I mentioned the other time, was the major exporter of tin. And by 1913, they produced 61 million tons. And so we have Welsh coal miners. And then Wales being totally integrated, we get even more than that. In 1916, David Lloyd George, who is Welsh, became the first Welshman to become Prime Minister of Britain. That's not uncommon. That the Welsh nationality is not a negative or a detriment nowadays. And of course, in World War II, Germany, the German Air Force in particular, bombed the hell out of the docks at Swansea, Cardiff, and Pembroke because they were vital in supplying the British forces in the war. And after 1943, it was an interesting little change. After 1943, 10% of the Welsh conscripts, those that were drafted into the army, were sent to work in the Welsh coal mines, not sent to the fronts. So they had less risk of being shot at and killed But of course, they were dealing with arsenic and all other things in their coal mining. So as a result, you never know. It's not a totally unhealthy or healthy situation. Now, in 1925, we have the creation of a political party in Wales called the Plaid Cymru, and Cymru being the Welsh name for Wales. And it was seeking greater autonomy and independence from the rest of the UK. We also have in 1962 a Welsh Language Society formed. The government of the UK invariably always sort of described Wales as a separate country, but it was ruling it. It was, the government in Westminster and London still ruled Wales. And Wales, though, did have representation in the British Parliament. They had 40 MPs out of 650. So it wasn't a great representation, but it was something, to say the least. Now, the Welsh language has a really special significance in Wales, and as I said, there's a whole section, 40% of the population still speak it. It really was a continuous history. And in fact, most of the laws of Wales were written in Welsh, not in Latin for the Romans, not in Norman French, not in Anglo-Saxon. So as a result, Welsh was and remained very significant. And as you know today, both Welsh and English are the official languages of Wales. And so, you need both there are on the rules. Now, here's a map of today's Wales and shows you the percentage of Welsh speaking. And as you can tell, the further you are away from the coast the boundary with England, which is over here, the less Welsh being spoken, the more English being spoken, because you get up to 80% only in the darkest places around, and very little on the border with England, to say the least. And, we have some interesting stuff to take a look at. I thought we'd go through some fascinating differences that the Welsh have. Here is examples of the Welsh clothing. And you'll see when they do, demonstrations and theater work, etc., etc. Then we also have some phenomenal Welsh representatives in acting. Famous Welsh actors include, of course, Richard Burton, who has unfortunately died in 1984. Catherine Zeta-Jones, she's still alive. She was born in 1969. Jonathan Pryce, who was born in 1947. Anthony Hopkins, who was born in 1937. And Glynis Johns. I'm not sure if she's gone, but she was born in 1923. I assume she's died. And guess who? Yeah, Tom Jones, born in 1940. So we have some very famous Welsh actors, singers, and the rest. We all benefit greatly from that, and would have a major loss if we didn't see them. Then we have in 1967, there was a British science fiction television series, which I watched faithfully, where a British intelligence agent, was abducted and imprisoned in a mysterious coastal village. It was created and starred Patrick McGoohan. He was prisoner number 6. And this camp was, or a village, was Port Meirion, I guess, and I'm probably mispronouncing that very badly. And it's Wales. And there it is. There's its position in Wales. And it was built by a famous architect, Sir Cloud William Ellis. And he built it. It took from 1925 to 1975. And it's built in the style of an Italian village, but it was really very modern. And we have a lot of people that have gone there. Noel Coward wrote Blythe Spirit while he was staying there, as did others. H.G. Wells wrote while he was living there. Bernard Shaw did that. And then we have lots of other actors and the rest who came because it was an interesting place. Gregory Peck, Ingrid Bergman, Paul McCartney, and, of course, George Harrison. Now, McCartney and Harrison came out of Liverpool, which we're going to tomorrow, which is not very far from here because Liverpool, unfortunately, the map dies, but Liverpool is right up there at the in England, but right around Wales. We also have, of course, famous Welsh politicians. As I mentioned, David Lloyd George, who died in 1945, and Bertrand Russell, who died in 1970. And, very famous Welsh. They're Welsh. And, a lot of people don't realize that. Now, let's more recent history. The investiture on July 1, 1969, Queen Elizabeth invested her son, Prince Charles, as the Prince of Wales. And that's the famous way that they've incorporated Welsh into the, English history. They have this formal position as the Prince of Wales. And he was invested with the insignia of that rank, similar to a coronation. He had spent 10 weeks before the coronation studying, learning Welsh culture, history, and more importantly, the language. So when he responded to the Queen in this ceremony, he responded both in English and in Welsh. And it's interesting, there was a BBC poll in 1999 that found that 73% of the Welsh speakers in Wales wanted this position of Prince of Wales to continue. They were not opposed to this at all. And as a result, it still does exist because as Charles is now the king, his first son, William, is now the Prince of Wales. And so he and his wife, Kate, are now the Prince and Princess of Wales. And they also have learned to speak Welsh. Because they find it's a great honor, but it's good to placate the Welsh by speaking Welsh, if you wish. The many castles that we have in Wales are the big attraction. We went to the Castle of Pembroke today. And this chart sort of says a little bit about that. The castles, 641 castles in Wales, really, vital. Whereas Starbucks, there's only 6, so it's like, it's not as significant. But, this is a real tourist attraction, and it keeps Wales going strong. So Wales has a decent economy. It has decent tourism. It's well respected by the English royalty, the Prince of Wales as a title, etc. So they don't seem to be doing too bad. And the many beautiful walks and hikes, the beautiful country offers a lot of pleasure. They get a lot of tourism, obviously, and Wales has the advantage of being part of the United Kingdom. And I think most Welshmen now Welsh population don't really feel the need to separate because they see themselves as pretty separate anyway. They have a separate language, they have separate legislature, separate executive function. Yes, they're part of Great Britain, if you wish, but they really are somewhat independent. And there's more than enough history to justify if they wanted to be independent. But it would why give up? Because they have a great relationship, commercial, business, and others, with the rest of the UK, United Kingdom. So why is it not a separate country? Because there's really no reason to be a separate country. And it's quite exciting for all of us to visit it and do our thing, whether it be hiking or just visiting castles, if you wish. And so with that, I think I've sort of overwhelmed the issue, and I wanted to let you know I've now finally put my books, just a few of my books, my travel memoir, up in the boutique. And if you buy one of those, I will sign it. And it's a travel memoir. My first cruise was at age 13, and I've done 67 cruises. And more importantly, because of my international work as a lawyer, I also have done 125 countries so far. And both my wife and I are continuing to cruise as much as we can, say the least, because it's an easy and great way, as you've all discovered, a great way to see the world. So with that, I thank you all for coming. Now, feel free to ask me any questions you see out on the when I'm outside. And particularly, about the history of any of these places. I'm not quite Rick Steves, but I might be able to give you some advice because I've seen both my wife and I have been able to see so much, and I saw so much as a businessman, as a lawyer, traveling around giving speeches and running businesses and conferences. So as a result, I really I'm open to that, and don't hesitate to do it if you have questions. So I thank you again very much. So.